Perfect. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Leah Kirchman. I'm the current Managing Director for Global Relay Bridge the Gap Fund. Our mission as a fund is to help young developing riders reach the professional level of the sport. And that mission includes delivering key information at important times of their career. And we think we're discussing a really important topic here today, REDS, or relative energy deficiency in sport. This came about as a collaborative project between Bridge the Gap Fund, EF, TIBCO SVB, and 94 Forward, which is the Commonwealth Games Legacy Fund. And we're so fortunate to have an amazing panel here today. We have Sara Poidevin from EF, and I know a lot of you might have seen the article that came out last week as the first part of this project, where Sara was so open about her experience with REDS and her journey through recovery. We'll share that article again if you didn't get a chance to read it yet. So thank you, Sara, for being so open and being with us here today. We also have Chris Radzilski. He's Sara's coach and the current performance manager for EF. And Chris is a coach and exercise physiologist. He's worked with tons of high-level athletes in the sport, so really understands it at a fundamental level. We also have Kevin Field here. He's the chair for Bridge the Gap Fund, and yeah, just has a lot of great insight into what it takes for riders to make it to the top of the sport. And the conversation will be moderated by Anne Guzman. And Anne owns her own nutrition consulting company. She's worked for years with endurance athletes, and also has a master's degree in health sciences, where she really has a fundamental understanding of the importance of nutrition and this topic specifically. So to start with, I wanted to give just a brief definition of what is REDS, what is relative energy deficiency in sport. Basically what it is when you have an imbalance in energy intake and energy expenditure, and that can be both intentional or unintentional. So you could simply just not be meeting your energy needs for the activity levels that you're doing. Could be a result of restrictive eating or excessive exercise. And what happens is when your body doesn't have enough fuel to sustain basic functions, then you start to get different symptoms, and everything can be affected, from your hormone system, your cardiovascular health, your brain health, your bone health. And sort of the last thing that's important at that point is your performance and your recovery, because your body is really just trying to survive. So it's a really big topic. We're excited to talk to this amazing panel here today. So with that, I'll hand it over to Anne.
Thanks, Leah. That's great to start off with the big picture definition there. And I'm sure, of course, we're going to unravel that today and pull it apart and get a bit more granular. A few things I wanted to point out about REDS, and as Leah mentioned, what underpins it, which is that low energy availability, which essentially is saying we don't have enough energy left over to operate all the other physiological functions in our body. I wanted to point out that this conversation is about males and females, and a lot of times in the media we see articles and conversations more geared towards the loss of the period and menstrual cycle because of low estrogen, low hormones in females, but the same things are happening in males. They just don't have that obvious symptom or signal to indicate that something's going on. The other thing I wanted to point out that I feel sure we will discuss today is that REDS doesn't look like anything. So people who are struggling with low energy availability in REDS don't look a certain way. And sometimes we can assume that, oh, this person is extremely lean, but everyone else, we don't need to worry about them because they don't have that aesthetic. But that's not the case at all. And I have a sense that Chris might speak to that today when he talks about some of the things he saw during Sara's journey. So Sarah, as Leah said, thank you so much for sharing your story. It is incredibly brave to talk about a struggle with low energy availability and your story. And so we thank you because of your story, we're having this conversation, and it's important to reduce and not have stigma around it. And that's what we're hoping to open doors for everyone listening today, that you too can leave this conversation and feel comfortable going to speak to someone and looking for help. I wanted to start off, Sarah, by revisiting your story. I'm not sure that everyone read it, but hopefully a lot of people have. Either way, if you could take us back to when you first remember restricting any of your nutrition, what do you believe led you to start doing that?
Yeah, I think for me, it started pretty early on. I think, yeah, it was just fueled by, a desire to get the most out of myself in racing and really just wanting to perform well. And then, yeah, when I had signed for my first professional contract, you just are really motivated to do everything you think you need to do to perform well for yourself, but also for the team. And contracts renew every year, and so there's always that pressure of wanting to have results and good performances throughout the year. So I think it came from a place of just like high motivation. Yeah.
Absolutely. And with the restriction, was your aim to get leaner and lighter for a particular outcome?
Yeah, I think like I had started out finding good strength on in hilly races, and so I really just kind of focused on that. But then it sort of led to a fixation. So instead of considering like all aspects of different types of racing, I was just sort of like more and more had a narrower focus on just being strong on hills.
Right. No, absolutely. And is there a bit of fear there that this is my value for the team, and if I don't keep this up, then what?
For sure, because even in when we would do other races, I would notice like I know I'm not as strong as some of the other women on my team and in different types of racing, and I really only excel in one type of racing, and so I have to make sure I keep being good at that type of racing.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I could see how that could drive behavior. We'll definitely pull that apart more. And Chris, maybe we can speak to that as well as far as pigeonholing a certain type of rider. But I want to stick with these questions for a few more minutes with Sarah. When did you first recognize that something didn't feel right, and what did you do about it?
I mean, I think it really took quite a bit of time before I recognized something as being, I guess, like noticing that something was a negative consequence, because, in the first few years that I was racing, it all just, like, to me, it seemed like quite normal. And I did have like access to a lot of resources, and nothing was ever flagged as being unhealthy or anything. And I had, mentioned my lack of cycle from the start, and nothing was ever really flagged. And so it really took a lot of time, and just like a long-term drop in performance and inconsistency in performance, where I really then started to just have to pinpoint like, okay, what is the root issue of all of this, and what am I missing? What am I doing wrong? But if it really did take a long time.
Right. And it sounds like you were doing the work to educate yourself, because you were asking people and you were being told that, oh, actually, everything's okay. And, listening to that just makes it so clear why it's important to keep advocating for yourself. How did you finally get help?
Yeah, I think it wasn't until it was after some time working with Dana, and then also having team dietitian, and then also having a team doctor, and even for them, like, because I had worked with Dana in the past, but sort of her ability to see trends over time and to have a better understanding of, I guess, like my personal habits in nutrition, and then seeing my performance over time, and then look for specific blood markers and kind of like put all the pieces together. So even then it wasn't like one red flag or one, bad performance or something like that, where it really like all came together. It was over time, a couple of professionals putting all the pieces together.
Right. And you really do need a team. It's so important to have those professionals and to also have the information yourself. But you're making a good point that it's insidious, like it creeps up over time. And that's exactly why we need to have these conversations, so that the athlete can have the self-awareness and the education about how much fuel you need, and about restricting or overextending, because you might not notice something for a long time. It can take a long time for the more serious effects of REDS to show up. Chris, I wanted to jump over to you, and Sarah will definitely come back. But Sarah's saying something really important, that it took a long time for her to notice the changes in performance. And every endurance athlete is tired, right? You're out there cycling so much. It's kind of the nature of the sport that there's going to be some fatigue. You get used to being tired. How would you say that an endurance athlete would differentiate between everyday tired and the type of tired that is resulting from chronic low energy availability?
That's a great question. It's obviously very, very nuanced. Just like training hard, you could smash yourself and be in a huge deficit and to make it obvious, or you can kind of be in that gray fatigue zone for a long, long time and just not be performing, and you just don't understand. So it's kind of similar. I think a lot of it is having a solid support team around you that can give you some perspective. So both within the cycling bubble, but more importantly, people outside the cycling bubble. So if you have a sports physician that you see, annually, they're going to have perspective. If you have some close support, whether it's, a best friend, a mentor, family, they can give you some perspective. So it's important to step out of the bubble, kind of see what you've been doing and get feedback from others to kind of start to put the pieces together. Because that's when things become obvious, because you can cover things up and rationalize things, and athletes do it better than anybody. But it's not until sometimes we have to hit rock bottom until we say, okay, I really have to make some changes, or I have to look a little deeper into this situation. This is the challenge of endurance sport, which is different than like a power sport. Power sport, or a sport with a lot of speed, athletes just get hurt. If you're doing heavy strength training and you're tired, it's obvious in the gym. Endurance sport is just very nuanced, and a lot of athletes just carry a lot of great fatigue. So, I think a really good support team around you, and then periodic check-ins throughout the year. Whether it's quarterly, you have a rest period. Do something about it. Reflect back. Talk to your coaches. Talk to those within your team. And kind of digest what you've done. How do you improve? So, and that's also the beauty of sport, is you're trying to make improvements, but you're also trying to reduce making continued mistakes, learn from the past, etc. So all those different cues, I think, could help.
Right. No, that's great. Super informative. You said something about hitting rock bottom. And again, we don't want to get there, right? So having that education and having those people around you that can maybe notice that something's changed, right? Leah's going to show us a diagram and we're going to see just how far reaching the effects of low energy availability can be. And right, maybe someone can point out that, wow, you know, your mood is different, or you notice you're not sleeping as much. There's so many factors, and we don't want to get to rock bottom. Something else that Sarah had mentioned, Chris, that I would love to hear your opinion on, based on your, you know, where you're coming from on the team. Sarah had mentioned that you pressured yourself as a climber, right? And the more that almost occurred more and more, as it was almost a self-fulfilling. So you're getting leaner, you're climbing better. And at first that was working out. What do you think about this notion of maybe pigeonholing a rider, in particular, a younger rider?
It's obviously dangerous. And I think you lose perspective of the overall qualities that is desired in a professional athlete. You've targeted one specific metric amongst many, and that's the dangerous part. I think we don't realize how complex the sport we're in. There's very few sports I don't even know of that has all these variables changing all the time. If you think about it, race courses change all the time. Teammates change all the time. Staff members change. Competitors change. Weather changes. Just nonstop changes all the time. I mean, imagine, you know, professional soccer game where the pitch changes sizes and your teammates change. Like, it would never happen. So we just have to realize that because there are so many variables in the sport, we really have to be adaptable and as robust as possible. So having said that, you know, pigeonholing yourself into a particular type of rider, it's not realistic, because the higher the level you get to, the more versatile you're gonna have to be as a rider anyway. Very few riders jump straight into being, you know, a GC rider. They need to learn support. They're going to have to ride in the cobbles and the classics. They're going to have to, you know, it's a 10-month a year sport. So, you know, it's actually detrimental to pigeonhole yourself. And it's not something that I would look at in a rider who can only be a climber.
That's a great point. I mean, you're essentially saying that, you know, the elephant in the room would be that a lot of people intentionally would restrict energy to lose weight. Unintentionally is a different story. However, you're saying when you're looking for a rider on the pro tour level, like, what are the qualities you're looking for? Because this doesn't seem to be one of them.
I tend to look for two different things, two different categories, really. It's off bike and on bike. For me, off bike is much more important. I look to understand who the athlete is, what's their academic background, what's their athletic background. For example, if you have an athlete that played high level soccer, you know they're going to understand teamwork. You know they're going to understand what it took or how it felt to lose a championship game. Those are super important. You know, try to better understand their personality type, who their support team is. Are they used to working with, you know, medical doctors, nutritionists, other coaches, different sport directors, etc. How autonomous they are. Like I said, you have all these variables. They have to take care of themselves in many different ways. I mean, there's one beautiful part about cycling is you're going to be challenged on many different levels. That's a fact, and that's unavoidable. So better get used to it. You know, and then there's things like, you know, media, how do you communicate, it's et cetera. So those are all off bike, and those are super important. You know, on bike is, you know, race experience, technical, tactical acumen, just overall knowledge of the sport. And I think that's where the challenge is amongst, you know, North Americans coming over and racing in Europe. It's just a different game. It's just has much more levels of complexity. And then there's the data side of it, which I won't go down that rabbit hole. But I think the important part is if you have an engaged, autonomous athlete who is a student of the sport and just absorbs information, they're going to advance at a much faster rate, while they let their physiology take time to develop. And that's the important part. It just takes time. There's no secrets. It just takes time. It's load over time. You know, most athletes hit their peak at 25 to 35 years old. You know, so there's no shortcuts really. I wish there was, but there isn't any.
Right. And you're making a great point. If there are young riders here listening, you know, when you're going through puberty, your body's going to change. That's important. That's healthy development. And you don't want to stunt that by having low energy availability. And that's exactly what will happen if that's done chronically. So super important point that let your body develop. It will be stronger in the way that it should be when it's finished developing than if you hold everything back, because as Sara has explained, you know, things will accumulate and add up, and soon you will start to see declines in performance. Thanks for that, Chris. Sara, I wanted to loop back. You said it took some time to notice some differences. You did find some help, and good for you for advocating for yourself and continuing to push. I think that's a great lesson in itself. Once you found some help, what were some of the bigger things that you started to implement in your day-to-day nutrition that you think would be great for others to hear and take away?
Yeah, I think like one of the biggest things that I worked on in the nutrition side was just fueling in advance for the training and for the racing that I was doing. So yeah, just trying to avoid big deficits before hard training sessions, or, you know, especially in racing, is really like preloading those sessions, you know, because otherwise you easily get into a deficit and you're just making up for it afterwards and compromising your performance, versus if you fuel in advance for what you're doing the next day or even 2 days later, you'll see a big change in performance. So that was one of the major changes. And the other thing for me was really just emphasizing consistently fueling with starchy carbs, so not restricting any sort of starchy carbohydrate, and then modifying that to whatever training and racing I'm doing.
Yeah, you made a great last point there, modifying that. You mentioned that in the article, that you learned to not just eat the same amount of food every day. So how are you doing that? Were you looking at how many hours you were training and figuring out approximately how much you would need, and then starting to get just an idea of that in your mind?
Yeah, it would really depend on, I guess, the length of the session, but also the intensity, of either the training session or of the race. And then, modifying. I think that's what makes the difference between fueling as an athlete versus fueling as someone who just goes out recreationally, is that, you're really fueling in advance rather than just going out for a big day and then sitting down and having a massive dinner after. Yeah.
Right. So, and how about your on the bike nutrition? Did that change a lot?
I was definitely more consistent in the fueling on the bike and really making sure I'm trying to maximize the amount of carbs that I take in per hour. And last year was definitely like the longest season that I've had at the World Tour level. And so it was really, you you know for sure, like you don't want to compromise anything on the nutrition side. You really want to give yourself as much as of an advantage as you can on the fueling side, so you can focus on your performance in the race.
Yeah, and you just made a great point. You had your longest pro season ever. And one thing Leah, your name always comes up for me when I think of longevity in the sport. And I mean, you have a sports nutrition background as well. So I'm wondering if you can speak to that. What are some tips you would give to athletes on how can you avoid low energy availability with some nutrition tactics, some big foundational ones? Sarah's just mentioned a few.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely agree with everything Sarah mentioned, especially, yeah, matching your fueling to the demands of the day. For myself, yeah, I'd recommend really planning for yourself. So, if it's at the start of the week or at the start of the day, really think about like what is your training that day and what are you going to fuel with, and yeah, make a plan, and also have something ready to eat when you return from training. Like, you're going to make better choices if you've thought about it beforehand. I also always like to fuel with things that I really enjoy eating. So I'm known for, baking a lot of things and bringing those on the bike. And I think it's easier to get in enough fuel when you're really enjoying what you're fueling with, and you're more likely to eat it. So that's one of my tips.
Yeah, for sure. If you've not followed Leah on Instagram, I'm always messaging her like recipe. That looks amazing. So she's a great baker. And yeah, I agree with that. You want to enjoy it. Same with what you're eating on the bike, right? It matters to like the taste of your sports drink. And it's great to not be gagging when you're eating the same jelly you've had for 6 years. Switch it up if that's what it takes, right? You want to be able to get that fuel down. Sarah, how long did it take you once you started implementing these new fueling habits before you started to notice good sensations in your body?
I think that also took some time. I think at first, it was, all of last year, I think was a really big mental struggle just to change my habits and to see, to have to go through some big changes personally. And I think, well, it took a few months before I was able to get my cycle back. But so that was a positive sign. And I did get good encouragement from my team that was a good sign and that I was doing the right thing and on track. But I still, at that point, wasn't feeling my best in racing. And so, I think by the end of the season, I was starting to, because I also had to relearn how to manage performance with, now having a regular cycle and how do I train and race like that? How do I manage that? So I think by the end of the season, I was starting to have a better understanding of that and felt a little bit better in racing. But I would say I wouldn't say I felt like my best in racing last year. And I think now this year, I've been able to just be more consistent and then have a healthier foundation to build back on the performance side. So I think it's still the long game.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And congratulations. What were some of the things that were going through your mind when you first started, the mental struggle that was like, gosh, this is going to be really hard to do?
I think just changing any sort of habit that's deeply ingrained in you that you've been doing for years is always challenging. And then, just being in that bubble of the race world and, it always feels like everything is like you just have to do everything really quickly and you want to, make those improvements really quickly and make changes really quickly, but it's hard to stay focused on the long run. So I think, the biggest struggles were just like, trusting the process and accepting that it's going to be really hard to change those deeply ingrained habits.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, Now you've been there through this whole process with Sara. From your perspective, what has it been like to watch the transformation, and what type of riding how has Sara changed as a rider? And Sara, you jump in as well. I don't want to pretend you're not here. I just know it's a different perspective.
Yeah, I've actually known Sara for a while, because I used to coach riders on her team, and I've done training camps with her and stuff. So I've known her evolution for a while. So it was actually quite interesting to see her evolution from, you know, a pegged climber to her time at Raleigh, and I think her time at Raleigh was instrumental in her progress in the sport, because it was an environment that had a tight bond amongst the team, and it was like a sisterhood on that team, and they really learned how to work as a team, and through that process, Sara became the ultimate teammate. She is the ultimate teammate. She will sacrifice every ounce of her for her teammates. And that's what you don't see in the results, but it's what sport directors, it's what performance directors are looking for, because it's somewhat rare. So through that evolution, you know, she really is quite good technically, quite good tactically. She's been in the game in Europe long enough to have that skill set. So when it was time to make the shift or to change her behaviors, she had a really solid foundation that we can still use as a team. So we say, okay, you know, Sara's you know, gonna make some behavioral changes, but so we're just gonna use her a little bit differently in her role. So, you know, a shift from maybe the person that's going to try to make the finals to support role, road captain, just overall support and knowledge tactically. And it worked out fine. She's a great asset for us, huge asset for us. But without that, you know, like we going back to, you know, just being a pure specialist, she may not have gotten a contract. She may not have gotten a renewal. She got a renewal because of just how great of a teammate she is, and all the skill set that she developed over the years. Now, fast forward to today, she's in a much better place. And I think she had the best winter that we've ever had. And the difference is she rarely had a bad day on the bike. You know, in the past, it was just unexplained. You know, there was some stomach problems, there's just no energy, no top end, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's the 5% that you're missing that gets you improving continually. Whereas this year we changed it up. We did a lot of cross training. She did a lot of cross country skiing. So it wasn't, you know, numbers based. It wasn't fixated on what some little computer on your bike is telling you. So through that combination, it allowed her to go through the process. And to Sara's credit, she did it in the most difficult time of her career, really, because she had to do it mid-season at World Tour level. This is difficult. This is super difficult. So did it, and I think we're seeing the benefits today. She's had a great year so far.
Amazing. No, it's really great to, you know, that would be really hard. It takes a lot of courage to do that mid-season and know that as a rider, you're going to transform. I'm sure that's scary. So kudos to you, because it sounds like you're better off health-wise, and the longevity in your sport is going to be so much better because of these changes. You mentioned a few things there, Chris. You mentioned fatigue, inconsistency. We've heard loss of the menstrual cycle. I'm wondering, Leah, if you can throw up a diagram just to show how many systems in our body are affected from low energy availability. Do you want to walk through this, Leah?
Sure. Yeah. So you can see that really REDS can affect every system of your body, and the symptoms vary greatly on the individual. So, Sarah had those specific symptoms that she mentioned, but you can also see other things. Menstrual cycle for women. But you can also see like your endocrine system, so in hormones. So in men, it can also show up as like decreased testosterone. Bone health, it could be you start to get stress fractures. And that's especially why this is important for young developing riders to especially focus on, because you're still building things like bone health. Your hematological, so it shows up in things like iron, different blood markers. Psychological, it can be, increased rates of anxiety, depression, or some symptoms. Your immune system, if you get sick more often, that can be a sign. Did I miss some, Anne? Other symptoms?
I mean, I think growth and development is a big one that I mentioned earlier. I mean, a lot of young athletes, you're still developing, and when you're developing, you need more energy, right? Once you've fully developed, you might need a little bit less. So there's not a ton of data on the developing athlete versus the mature athlete, but a fair assumption would be that you actually need more energy because you are still in the building phase. For example, Leah just mentioned bone health. You reach your peak bone mass in your early 20s. So everything you're doing now is going to determine that peak bone mass, which is so important for you later in life, but also from a performance perspective. Breaking a bone, it takes a long time to heal, right? So now your season is compromised. Psychologically, you hit, and even your metabolism, so your resting metabolic rate, will drop with low energy availability. And I recall speaking to Chris when we had a meeting before this talk, and he had mentioned that some crazy stuff was happening when Sarah's, when they started managing everything, that she wasn't fueling a lot and she was doing a lot of load, but she's actually gaining weight, right? So it can really mess with your metabolism. And I think that sometimes when we see a diagram like that, it can be a little sciencey. So we wanted to also touch on some red flags, so that you might want to be aware of if you're having any of these behaviors. So if you find yourself doing, diets that really aren't appropriate for endurance sports, so you're fasting or you're trying a keto diet, I mean, there's a red flag that you might be impacting your energy intake. Perfectionistic behaviors can often lead to impacts on nutrition. Trying to stay super lean all year long. So again, you're not doing any periodization of anything there. You're more concerned about your aesthetic than you are your performance. That would definitely be a red flag. Being overly critical about your performance, right? So again, I mean, about your appearance. It should be about your performance, not about your appearance. So if you're obsessing about how you look versus fueling for the sport, that's definitely something to think about. And then restricting your calories on days when you're not training, right? So that doesn't always work out. If you're have 2 big training days and you have an easy day in between, it doesn't mean you don't need to fuel because you're not doing anything. And that is a mentality that I've seen a lot of. And so that can add up, and it's definitely not the right approach to take. Can anyone else on the panel think of some other red flags?
Well, I wanted to add to Leah's list there, a very important one, especially for our attendance. I think it's cognitive function. Cognitive function. Our brain's major fuel source is carbohydrate. So with all these student athletes in the room, your brain is a giant carbohydrate sponge. And that takes significant energy, much more than I think we know I try to consider that in training. Usually, every couple of hours of studying, I count as a training hour. So 3 hours of studying is 1 training hour. That's how I calculate it, because cognitive fatigue is significant, and it's a drain on the system. It's a stress. And like I said, your primary fuel source is glucose. So that's an important one to add to the list.
No, absolutely. Our brain does use a lot of sugar. And you're right, if you're in school, that's a big deal. And you need to be snacking. It's hard to meet your energy needs as an endurance athlete without snacking, right? You'd have to have 3 really large meals. So it's good to think about also eating regularly throughout the day, because what we have seen in the research, not all but some, is that even restricting energy within a day can negatively impact your hormones. So if you're not eating for 6 hours of the day, you're attempting to fast for some reason until lunchtime. I mean, this is potentially going to backfire. And regardless, it's not a good strategy, right? You want to be getting used to fueling regularly throughout the day, and that's a good way to be able to meet your energy needs. I wanted to come back to Sara and ask, did you do any type of, I guess, specific education on nutrition through any type of food logging, or did you not take that approach?
When I started working with our team dietitian, we did, I think a couple times, just like a daily food log, which was really valuable just for her to get an idea of, my daily habits and how I match my energy needs to my training. So I think, we used a few different tools. And even I would say, one thing that might be important to mention is, even now, like, I am racing and training consistently, but we're not like weighing anything. Like, we still use just like visual portions, and that's been a really helpful guide. So it really doesn't have to be super measured and scientific. Like, just getting to know, like, when you look at a plate, does this look like enough for what I'm doing next? Or does this look like enough to refuel from the session that I just did? So learning that was really helpful. So I'm not, fixating on everything, but I have a good sense of, is this enough?
Right. And you make a great point. It's good just to do it even a handful of times, because if you don't know where you're coming from, how do you know how to bridge the gap? Well, that was a plug for Bridge the Gap, wasn't it, Kevin? But truly, if you don't know what to change, how do you know what to change? So like you say, just to learn, what does 150 grams of carbohydrates look like on my plate? Because if I need 500 in a day, oh, that's what it looks like. I'm going to have 3 plates like that and 2 that kind of look like this. So getting an eyeball for, 2 cups of rice on a plate, those simple things are really useful. And you made a great point that it doesn't need to be obsessive. And it shouldn't be obsessive. And there's going to be error in logging anyways, right? So there's error in energy intake on a lot of journaling. There's error in energy expenditure from power meters, heart rate monitors. Even in the lab, it can be 100 to 600 calories of error. The idea is not about perfection. It's about getting the big picture. What does my fueling need to look like? How do I spread it throughout the day? How can I make sure I'm meeting those energy needs? Chris, can you say that you see pretty clear connections in the athletes that you've worked with between fueling and performance? I know all the athletes are different, but if you were to just take a big picture, is it pretty crystal clear?
It's pretty simple. If you're looking for the ultimate performance enhancer, it's nutrition and proper fueling. It's simple. Everything else is very, very minor. So because nutrition enhances the load, all the hard training that you do, and your recovery, the 2 main components. And we realize that, we know that, it's load over time, and our progression is curvilinear. We're making the most gains earlier in our career. So we're trying not to disturb that as much as possible. Okay, so we can find our genetic ceiling, and then you start to tweak once you've hit that ceiling and really developed fully, physiologically, mentally, etc. So that's what I look for. I look for consistency of load over time. So typically riders that struggle with nutrition, there's a lot of inconsistency. They'll have good periods, but big down periods. One season looks different than another, and like I said, for my role, I'm looking for consistency over time, because it's a 10-month race season, and you need to be good in all these different conditions. So it's an essential part of it.
Right. And you make a great point. There's no magic bullet, right? Everyone's looking for that supplement that's going to do it. The supplement, if it's useful for someone's scenario and it's safe, is the cherry on top. So the biggest bang for your buck is really coming from big nutritional foundations. Leah, do you have anything that you want to add to this conversation that you feel we haven't touched on yet? Or Kevin?
Yeah, I think it's been a really great conversation, and yeah, there are really positive messages that we can just learn a lot from Sarah's personal experience.
Right. Sarah, if you could go back to when you first started restricting, and let's imagine that someone here listening today is intentionally reducing their energy intake, what would you say to that athlete?
Yeah, I think the thing that I wish I would have done differently early on is just seeking more help, and just knowing that as an athlete, you're not expected to be able to figure everything out on your own. Just like training, you're not expected to know how to prepare for races. And so it's the same on the nutrition side, just knowing that athletes at all levels are relying on professional support, and not just one time here or there, like consistently through their racing careers, they're seeking help and getting advice, and making sure that what they're doing is based on science and on facts, and not just on trends. And just really playing that long game.
Right. And you said something earlier about trusting the process, right? And I think another message that we can take away is to listen to our bodies. If something feels off, like investigate. Again, we have the obvious sign with the female of losing your period, but if you're a female on a birth control pill, that's actually going to mask that obvious sign, because when you're on the birth control pill, you're having a period every 3 weeks, no matter what's going on, because you're removing those hormones, you're getting a drop, you're having a period. And so that's something to keep in mind that we haven't touched on as well, that can mask low energy availability. And so you would need to look for other symptoms. And I understand that people are going to stay on the birth control pill for certain reasons. So in that situation, you want to think about all the other symptoms. Chris has mentioned inconsistency, right? There's fatigue that's just not typical fatigue. Maybe you're not sleeping, you have GI upset, your cognition isn't clear, you're not able to focus. It's just so far reaching. You're getting sick all the time. You're not recovering from your injuries quickly, getting stress fractures. You can see how far reaching. And there really is no validated tool for early detection of low energy availability. And that's why having education, having resources is super important. We don't want to hit rock bottom. That can really derail your career for a good year or so, right? So intervening is super important. Chris, is there anything you'd like to add before we hand it off to Leah to start concluding? Or I don't know, Leah, if you're going to do questions.
I think I think I want to address the overemphasis on watts per kilo. This is fabricated from the men's side of the sport. 270-kilometer races with 5,000 plus meters of climbing. Yeah, you have to have good watts per kilo. The women's side of the sport it's different. It's a different dynamic. It's much more of a power-based, on the power-based spectrum side. It's shorter, it's intensified. So you're better off being a much more powerful rider than a featherweight. And if you look at the best riders in the world, they're strong. A lot of them come from cyclocross. A lot of them come from track endurance. They are strong and they pack a punch. So forget that. Forget it. You'd rather be strong, fuel your body so it develops properly. And, genetics are to see where that ceiling ends up taking you. I wanted to address that.
I'm so glad you addressed that. Thank you. That was really very good point. Leah, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. I think this was an amazing conversation. So many great points came up. Yeah, thank you, Sarah, Chris, and everyone for being here. Yeah, we did want to follow up. We'll follow up on this conversation by sending out some resources. So if you are out there looking for more support, we'll send that out. I'll share one in the chat right now. We found there is a search to find sport physicians in Canada, and you can go to this website and see who's available in your area. I think that's a really useful resource to have if you think that you recognize maybe some issues going on with yourself and you really want to go talk to somebody. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. Yeah, we'll send out some more things. And we have a few minutes left. Did we want to take any questions?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, just wanted to mention one thing you made me think about is that when you are food logging or working with someone with the food log, or you do go to get blood taken, we just always have to keep in mind, but what we see in that moment is not always reflective of what someone's been doing for months before that. So I might get a food log from an athlete and it looks great, but it really just doesn't match up with what's been going on for the last 4 months. And sometimes we do what's called the halo effect, and we suddenly start eating well and we have to do a food log. So it is, Sarah's smiling. So it's it's super important to just be honest with yourself. That's the way you're going to get the most support. And I realize that means you need to have trusting relationships with the professionals that you're speaking to. And I realize that sometimes that can take time. But I just wanted to mention that sometimes when we do these diagnostic type blood tests, or you're doing food logging, that it's not always reflective in the moment. You could get a blood test in your off season when you're 15 pounds heavier, but that's not what was happening in the in season, right? So those things are just something else to keep in mind. Anyhow, turn it back to you, Leah. I just wanted to touch on that.
No, it's a really great point. Yeah. So yeah, we have a couple of minutes. If anyone has a question for any of our panelists, you can unmute yourself or raise your hand. Does Kevin has a question.
Yeah, so I have a comment. So we're fortunate today that lots of people from the Canadian Sport Institute Network have joined the call, thanks to Kurt Innes at CSI Pacific. And one who, Kurt actually suggested that we ask Dr. Mike Wilkinson, who's on the call, if he actually had any other sort of insights or parts of the conversation that he took note of that he would like to sort of extend or add to or make some comments on. I think it'd be awesome to tap into the knowledge and the resources of some of the other people that we've got on the call today. So
Thanks,
Mike,
Kevin.
if you're there. Yeah.
You put me on the spot just as well I was listening.
Well, Kurt did.
And first, thanks very much, Sarah. And I think the story that you give from my position, and those that don't know me, I'm a sports med physician, is uncannily common. And I think that the thing that we see is that, I think you mentioned it, is athletes having those early gains, and what works early on in the career, which is basically losing weight, and that's the one thing they can control a lot of the time, is the food, seems to work. And then you get to this point where the workload is subtly overcoming the energy intake. And so this is something that's not, we don't recognize it immediately. And so it takes time, and you end up having to build a relationship with your support team. So whether it's your nutritionist or whether it's some of the IST support, the physiologists or physicians, it's an ongoing relationship of trust, but also being able to pick up on those subtle issues. And a lot of the time it comes down to, as you said earlier, just not recovering. And it's not one session that doesn't work, but it's a series of sessions not working. And you suddenly start finding that despite the effort you put into the racing, it's not working. You're bonking, to put it bluntly. And then the next day's race is not going well. I think the other thing I'd point out is that we're lucky in Canada in that we have a number of the world's experts on REDS or RED-S. And in fact, there's a whole new consensus that's just come out, and people at CSI Pacific, so Paddy McCluskey, Trent Stellingworth, Marga Mountjoy out east, have all been sort of world leaders in this. And I think it really is a good sign in Canada that it's been recognized. And I think it was Anne that said, there is no one quick blood test that picks it up. We look at trends when we look at the blood. So when we look at the iron, we look at the thyroid hormones or some of the earliest ones that come up, but it's a trend. And I think the thing I would say is, look, it's just looking for those early signs, trusting your coach when they say, what's going on here? Why are we're not getting these gains? And not just trying to go hard work, more work is always better. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Kevin.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, that really added a lot. Mike, thank you for your insight. And yeah, that brings us to the hour, so I think we'll wrap things up now. I do want to encourage anyone, if there's any way that we can help as Bridge the Gap Fund, like, please just reach out and we'll figure out where to direct you to, find you the right resources as a support. We're really just here to help. And yeah, once again, thank you to all our panelists and everyone for joining. And yeah, I know we're all really excited to also follow Sarah's, the rest of Sarah's racing season as she races nationals this week and then is back on the world tour schedule. So good luck as well, Sarah.
Thanks again, Sarah, for sharing your story.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Good, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.